All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is another episode of Off the Record podcast where we are interviewing CEOs and VCs to help you make your business better, tactics, bootstrapping, raising money, all of this good stuff. And today I have an opportunity to chat with Stephen Hakami, the CEO of a company called Wiza, Wiza, which is a bootstrap company which makes software that creates email lists from LinkedIn. Stephen, great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I'm going to start a little bit with your story without asking you, how did you get started? You dropped out of the university and then you, in a way, kind of created your own real MBA when you were doing your, I believe, sales development role. How did that happen? This whole quite dramatic shift for you.
Yeah. So funny enough, this all stems back from a high school job I got at a parking lot. And I started working there with a friend, and the guy who owned the parking lot, one summer I was working before going into university, and he mentioned, hey, maybe if you'd like a 2-3 week internship, you can help me out at the company that I work at, and just some work experience in an actual office. I think I was like 16 at the time, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. So did that, and just did data entry. So I was entering literally information from LinkedIn into Salesforce. So at 16, that's when I started
pretty standard.
Kind of the LinkedIn Salesforce stuff. And I spent some more time there, and he ended up offering me a sales role position for the following summer. So I took him up on his offer, and I was probably 17 at this time. Took a sales role, was totally scared on the phone. So I relied heavily on email, and I was all about volume from the start. So I would try to find more leads than the rest of the sales team, get more emails out, more follow-up out. And that was my way to kind of make up for my, I was young, so it was tough to talk to like a CHRO on the phone. So that's kind of how I made up for it. So I was doing that for a few years, finished university while working there remotely, and eventually decided to drop out after about a year and a half at the University of Laurier, which is a school in Canada. Dropped out.
Why is that? Is it because you are like, hey, I'm not really learning much, like I'm not gaining like practical experience, or was there like something else?
Yeah, I never wanted to go in the first place. It was more something where it was like, okay, my parents would kill me if I wasn't going. And once I kind of had a steady income, it was enough that I could kind of drop out without them killing me. I always, from a young age, wanted to be an entrepreneur. So that was always on my mind, and it was just a matter of when it was time that I could do that. Funny story, actually, which now my parents know now. I've only recently told them. I actually pretended to go to school for like a year afterwards, while I was working, actually, and working on the company I started before Wiza. So never liked school.
Well, there's some people like that, like who are so into the whole entrepreneurship field that just school seems like such a really weird place. Like what are you doing there, right?
Yeah, it's just to me it lacked like practicality. I felt like I could learn so much quicker on YouTube and digging into topics that I'm interested in at that moment than what the curriculum dictates. So I found that when you're interested in something genuinely, you learn it so much easier. So kind of went down my rabbit holes of interest, which were all kind of based around entrepreneurship and starting up a startup.
And you didn't start Wiza, you started Kindling, is that right? Your first company.
So the first company I started was called Torch. And that's when I left the conference company I was working for in sales. What Torch did is it would scan a user's Gmail inbox, and it would look for prospects that you didn't follow up with. So say you sent an email to a guy last week and you still haven't sent a follow-up, it would alert you of that. Gmail kind of has that functionality now, except it's not as holistic. It kind of just here and there picks one off. This was kind of like, hey, here's 200 of them that you need to follow up with for high volume sales reps. So that ultimately, wasn't working out, and I kind of had to pivot just to have some income because I had left the job. So I came up with the idea for Kindling, which was basically just an agency. I knew cold outreach just from my job and from trying to grow Torch with cold outreach. So I was like, okay, I'll do this for other startups. So that's where Kindling came from. Started doing that for a bit, grew it a bit over time, and then as we picked up clients, really the need for Wiza became more apparent, and I finally got the chance to come up with the software again and get back in the game that I really like, which is software.
And you talked about this really good point, which is special, I think, when you're early into your bootstrapping, something where you said it's easy, it's better to have a solution where the customers are actually already researching the problem versus they're like, oh, it would be nice to.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest lesson from Torch was it was actually a great product. And when I talk about it now, I'm like, it still hurts me a little because I'm like, sales reps should be using this. But what it did was it pointed out a problem you didn't know you had. Kind of by definition, if we're showing you a prospect, you didn't know they existed. So if you asked, the average sales rep, hey, are you missing follow-up with any of your prospects? They'd say, no, I'm following up with everyone. But it would uncover prospects that they didn't realize. So it would take a pretty self-critical rep to be seeking out like, hey, how do I find the prospects I forgot about? Or, so compare that to Wiza, where it's people know they want to find more prospects. People know they want to prospect faster and more automated, and they want to save time. And they're searching for ways to do that. And it's much easier to get in front of those people that are, already down that funnel of interest and get in front of them with a Google ad or a blog post or whatever it might be.
So how does Wiza work? You have something like Sales QL, which is basically a Google Chrome extension. What it does is you just go on Sales Navigator or just LinkedIn, and it kind of like pulls all the emails and makes it into a list, which you can then export as a CSV file or Excel. My guess is you do a lot more than that, or do it in a different way.
Yeah, so we've become really focused on our data quality, and that's the biggest reason people come to us. So we allow you to export entire LinkedIn searches and saved lead lists. We take it a step further. We also verify every single email address that you find with Wiza. So you get 99.5% deliverability from every email that we provide you. We also only charge for those valid emails. So we're not just simply guessing an email format and providing it for you, and then you find out if it's valid or not later. That hurts your domain authority. It's not good to have that many bounces, and it's just, kind of messes up your CRM. You're only getting valid emails with Wiza. We also do a lot more on the side of, like I said, data cleanup and data quality. So we're cleaning up stuff like middle initial. If a prospect's LinkedIn profile, let's say instead of Stephen Hakami, it says Stephen H. We're taking steps on other mediums to try and figure out actually what is his last name and then what is his email. We're taking a number of steps to find emails where we now get, an average of over 80% valid emails in the US. So it really is our data quality.
Right.
And on top of that, we now enrich that data. So stuff like, phone numbers, personal email, Facebook profile, company headcount, headquarters, et cetera, over 30 data points.
Right. And is the intent, Steve, to basically put it in like something like SalesLoft or Outreach and then go from there? Or it's like you could maneuver it in your app, do it all in one place. Like, how do you envision that? Or how does it, from the workflow perspective, works right now? I know I'm probably asking too many in-depth details, but curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's some that's some stuff that's on our roadmap to kind of continually extend the functionality. But the way most of our users use it today is that they'll export the search and then they'll sync it over to, like an outreach type tool and send it through there. It really depends on the company.
Right. Now, I know you are, like, how did you take, maybe just focus a little bit here on this point. So you had Kindlin, which was obviously the agency, and you kind of maneuvered into SaaS, which is very, very different. What was the hardest part? Like, how did you kind of like make that change? I assume Torch played a big part in that.
Yeah. So let's start with the hardest part. The hardest part, in my opinion, of switching from an agency to a SaaS company is that SaaS companies typically have, a lot lower cost than an agency for your customers. So, there's many agencies that are making good money with 5, 10 clients, which is kind of in the boat we were in. Just like a couple clients paying a couple thousand a month. And then, right there, you have a decent business with 10 clients and you
pretty
take care of them.
standard. Yeah.
Right.
With
Yeah.
all the pros and cons.
Right. And then when you shift to SaaS, it's like, every customer is giving you $50 a month and, you're maybe not getting paid back on your efforts to acquire that customer for many months. So you need to have more volume. So the strategies that worked as an agency are different than the strategies that are going to work as a SaaS company. And you have to be more scalable. And as you're pivoting, you need to be able to, take those losses in the early days when you just have a few customers paying a little bit of money, and just understanding that, hey, where there's, these 20 SaaS customers, there's probably 20,000 others, and we'll be able to get those. So I'm going to take that leap of faith to kind of set aside the agency and continue down that path of software.
So
I'd say that's the hardest part.
Were you still running the agency in parallel while you were slowly ramping up the SaaS product?
Yeah. So we serviced couple clients, but we didn't allow any additional clients or do any efforts to acquire any new clients. And so we continued to service those until they eventually turned off. We were pretty high volume. So by nature, we had a lot of, cancellations in the sense of, hey, no one's really our target market anymore because we kind of exhausted LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So not the best way of doing it. And if I were to do the agency again, I would take a more, definitely more high touch approach. But that was just kind of an easy way of doing it, frankly.
In what sense? In what sense a different approach? In the sense that you don't hit everybody with a message, hey, like, can we jump on a quick call and, hit like thousands upon thousands of people on LinkedIn?
Yeah. I'd rather now, if I was doing it, I would use Wiza Enrich, so this is the way we do our outreach strategies at Wiza, is Wiza Enrich picks up phone number, Twitter, personal email, stuff like that. So we don't just send cold email. We use their personal email to deliver Facebook ads. We deliver Google ads and YouTube ads. We LinkedIn message, and we maybe follow them on Twitter. So we're getting them on 5 different mediums, and we can, go after a more targeted list with more high touch, and hopefully convert more of those, get more interest from those lower number of prospects with that more kind of aggressive or omni-channel approach.
And while doing that, I assume your cadence is a lot longer. Instead of you're like, okay,
Right.
We have 7 emails, we're going to hit them one after day, and then see what happens.
Right, exactly.
Now, I want to talk about this because this is something you wrote on Medium that really, really caught my attention because I've been in the same role as you in sales before. You talked about context is overrated, relevance is more important. Talk to me about that, because John Barrows, a lot of other sales folks talk about the context, and it is important, but I'm curious about your perspective about, hey, like, don't really worry about that, sending that article, that blah, 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 but you actually, how relevant your message is.
Right. Yeah, so at the time I wrote that, I think that those Torch days, probably like maybe 3 years ago now, but there seemed to be a lot of cold email knowledge that was going around that was sort of like, hey, I'm reaching out because we both went to, the University of Western, go team, whatever, all this kind of stuff. Or like, oh, it looks like you're from wherever, and I hope you're a Miami Heat fan or whatever. Things like that, where, it's adding some context to the start of the email. Or I'm reaching out because of this. But to me, that really doesn't mean much. All it does is prove to the person, hey, there was like this much effort put into this email, not zero. And it's like, for me, it's more important to have a message that's relevant and to have relevance in my messaging. So I'd rather not mention that I go to the same school as you went to 10 years ago, but this message, it's the rest of everything else is relevant, right? So you're the right contact. I understand what my offering is and who should be buying it. So if I'm selling a SaaS or an agency or whatever it is, I understand who has the pain points that my SaaS solves, and I'm reaching out to the correct person. And it's relevant for whatever reason. Maybe it's around, like, let's say a round of funding, and I have a hiring solution. That's relevant context that you can provide. But yeah, that sort of blatant context that supposed to is to create rapport, I don't think does much at all, especially over an email.
Right. But I mean, it's like, let's hit the pain point well, and then if you do it, then we could afford to go a little bit more at scale and hit 200 people versus like trying to individually one by one, have super custom email, which could work for the agency, but I mean, for SaaS won't, right? Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's different ways of approaching it and how personalized you can be. But I think, like anything, it's a balance, and there's a balance of how customized you should be in your outreach, because it's just not going to allow for the scale that you need. I think a lot of getting responses comes down to picking the right people, and it's something that people don't talk about much. Is people all the time talk about subject lines and email body and ways to be unique and images in your email and whatever, but to me, the most important fundamental thing is, are these the right people that are genuinely interested in your product? And if it's clear that you're fixing a pain point for me, even if I've got no personality and I got no images or GIFs in my email or whatever it is, I want to reach out and respond back to your email because it's interesting to me. So it doesn't really matter. So as long as you get that across to the right person, then all that other stuff is just the last little bit. Everything else is the majority of it.
I just while you were speaking, I was thinking of all the cold emails that I get, and most of the time, 99.999%, they talk about something that I don't need, or I never had that problem. Like, it's nicely written. Some people go far, they'll write a novel. I admire that, but it's kind of funny because it just doesn't do anything, and the amount of times an email was relevant was so very few times, and it doesn't have to be long. To show it doesn't have to be like a few key lines. What you are actively, like you have said with Torch, actively researching the problem. If it's a big enough pain, I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I want to invest into, crypto may be a bad example because it's finance, but something similar. Like, okay, I've got time. Let's chat.
Right. Yeah, and it's about being the right person at the right time. And there's ways that you can do that, especially nowadays, figuring out technologies that people use. If you're a SaaS company, looking at competitors. So if we look at, people that use zoominfo, we can now buy data and know which companies use zoominfo, and we can reach out with the pain points that we know are relevant based on our competitive analysis of, hey, people come to us all the time because zoominfo's data isn't fresh enough. So if I'm writing an email to zoominfo customers and they're the right titles, then I'm going to mention the freshness of our data. I'm not going to say, hey, I see you use zoominfo using this tool, but I'm going to mention, hey, a lot of people are switching over to Wiza from zoominfo because of our data freshness, and that's gonna pique their interest.
Yeah, and is it still the case from your perspective that a lot of folks still rely on zoominfo versus LinkedIn data?
Depends.
In terms of their outbound efforts, if it's a SaaS business.
So what we're seeing is that top down, there's still that sort of sales leadership is investing in zoominfo and wants their team to use it. And then there's the team itself that are actually using it day to day, and they're finding tools, like Wiza and other tools, and they want to go on LinkedIn because when someone starts a company or gets a new role, they update it on LinkedIn that day. And zoominfo might not pick up that change for like a year, right?
Yeah.
So they want that. They want to be one of the first to reach out when this guy gets, the new role, and LinkedIn has that information, as well as, a lot more. So we find the reps themselves are coming more to LinkedIn, and that's why, a lot of people are coming to us and they're saying, hey, our team is always on LinkedIn. They're not even logging into zoominfo anymore. We see you work nicely with LinkedIn, and that's kind of what starts the conversation with us.
Yeah, I think they're like for Wiza, there's like this big opportunity in the future, in my opinion, like because I've been in this role, is where if you are able to figure out how to enrich data from Salesforce with LinkedIn data, that's a big use case where a lot of folks will pay $50,000+ per year for ZoomInfo just to purely enrich the data from ZoomInfo or similar companies to update their Salesforce, because it's mostly a lot of junk,
right.
And that's where a lot of money comes in. Like if that gap is bridged, then there's a lot of value from that perspective beyond the sales rep, because the ops are really well funded with a lot of sales companies, right? Or rev ops, what they call them.
The issue becomes, what if ZoomInfo's data is not good enough, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it gets sticky.
Now, I want to talk about bootstrapping, because obviously you have bootstrapped your company right now, and we talked a little bit before. You said it was more by choice, but right now you're getting some interest of people like more considering potentially talking to you about investment. What is going on right now? Are you considering about investment? What are your thoughts on how do we scale this thing kind of going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've been happy with the way that we've scaled from as a bootstrap company. It's forced us to kind of automate things and not just hire as a solution, and kind of have good systems in place. Like our outreach strategy that I mentioned before, one guy manages all that, and then sales rep just manages what come back. So we don't have sales reps, doing their own prospecting, outreach, and all that. We've been able to automate it in a way that's still personal and omni-channel. So these are some of the benefits of bootstrapping. Plus, you're building a business that has value outside from kind of the hype of tech and SaaS in general. A bootstrap business that's profitable and cash flow positive, will always have value. So those are some of the benefits for sure. In terms of our plans, I think if we raise money, it would have to be strategic in one of two ways. One thing we're looking at is maybe acquisition of a company that would really help our growth. And if they were a larger company, we would need to raise some capital to do that. And then the other is our sales team. So if we're developing our sales process, we're relatively young, and if it becomes very, very clear that for every 5 sales hires at this amount of dollars, we produce this 5 times return, then we may get to a point where to continue to scale that fast enough, we'll need to raise money. So that's kind of the 2 scenarios I see that we would raise money, but until then, we're pretty happy being bootstrapped.
But that's what I was going to say. I think you look pretty happy with just owning 100% of your company, not trying to necessarily raise a certain amount ASAP, right?
Yeah. I think it allows us to make better decisions, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, we spoke with a lot of founders on this show as well, and some of them are very, like we had Ilya from Van Hack. He's super into bootstrapping. He loves to control 100%. Yes, it's smaller. Yes, all of the scale is not the same. Versus some other people, they're like 100%. We're gonna raise this amount, and of course, it's very contextual, right? Whatever you're trying to, whatever industry you're in, and the type of application you're building. But it does. On top of that, there's all this preference from you as a CEO, like which direction you think is you're comfortable with personally.
Right. I think that's I think naturally entrepreneurs are pretty they don't look like kind of authority over them, if that makes sense. Like whether that be school or a job, the boss. So, a board or an investor is in some ways the same, especially if you raise a lot of money and you're now, a minority shareholder, and like a PE firm owns a majority share, then you're essentially working for that PE firm. So yeah, it's sometimes it's the smart thing to do. I think it really depends on the type of company you have. If you've got like an Uber type company, that's not a business you're ever going to bootstrap. So you got to raise. But something like a SaaS that hits a specific problem on the head, and can grow to multi-million-dollar per year revenues, and I think if you can do it, I would stay bootstrapped as long as you can.
This is a Tim Ferriss question, but I would be curious how you would outline the answer. With your current company, are you hunting for an antelope or a field mice?
In terms of in terms of customers we're hunting for, or in terms of the size of the company?
In terms of the size of the company.
So I would say it's tough to say. I think
maybe there's something in the middle.
Yeah, like I don't know, squirrel. No. But no, when I think about the future of our business, and I look at our competitors, I see a huge amount of opportunity, and I could, I look at the size of, I think zoominfo has like a $19 billion market cap today, and when I look at that, I see that we have a lot more innovation and ideas that can lead to a lot better sales prospecting tools. So when I look into the future, 5 years, antelope. But today, being realistic, where we are, we're closer to the field. What was it? Field mouse.
Field mice.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's us today. But we're looking to continue to grow into the antelope position. In terms of our customers, because that's interesting too. Mm-hmm. We started off with the field mice customers as well, but now as we build this sales team and we're getting larger enterprise contracts, all our efforts on how do we get more of those zoominfo customers over to us, and that's represents a lot larger contract sizes, and for us they're antelopes.
Yeah, right, which is a great point. Now there's this important, I would probably call it more like an elephant in the room in a way, where LinkedIn. And mm-hmm. LinkedIn has the best data set in the industry. I don't think anybody could really argue with that. However, they really don't like when somebody's scraping their stuff, or like running automation, for example, linked helper or Dux, DUX soup. They don't like that stuff. Those guys, I think they violate LinkedIn a lot more directly. And so they figure out how to do it. I don't think you're doing it necessarily, but there's always this point where LinkedIn knows how valuable it is, and they don't want it to companies to scale on top of their high quality data, or it does seem like they don't. Like, how do you look at that challenge? Because it seems to be like a really big one, especially if you go like a lot further in the future and you grow.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is in an interesting boat where they have two customers to serve. One is the sales teams that are actually paying them money, right? $70 a month or whatever it is for Sales Navigator to look through that database. And the other is their free customer. But they have to put the free customer first, because without the free customer, there's no Sales Navigator customer. And that free customer doesn't like, as a LinkedIn user myself, I hate these automated messages on LinkedIn. They're annoying, right? Like, I get them all the time. It's clear when they're automated. At this point, I get more automated LinkedIn messages than I do cold emails, funny enough. And I probably get, I don't know, 5 a day on LinkedIn, at least. And so they're also more invasive than an email. Like an email, my email is already kind of filled with stuff, and I need some of it, and I kind of look through it. But the LinkedIn message pops up on my phone, my laptop, and it's more in my face. So that to me hurts the user experience a lot, and I'm not surprised why LinkedIn has kind of gone after solutions that do that, like DuckSoup, for example.
It's surprising though they did not invest. It doesn't seem like, maybe they do behind the scenes. They didn't invest into inbox filtering, whatever solution is, even the basic one like email. Obviously, email been a lot longer, but figure out how to catch that spam messages. It's not hard. You can do it.
Yeah.
And they just haven't done it. So like that really hurts the real conversations of people. But we kind of get in a bit of sidetrack.
Yeah, it's tough because people need to network. It's a networking tool, and so it's like, how do they really determine which is which, right? You can't really say like, hey, no two LinkedIn emails should look the same, because it's like, well, they kind of naturally will if you're kind of reaching out to similar people. So, they're in a tough position in some sense, and I think with them they kind of have to go after, the worst actors, which they did with like LinkedIn Helper, DuckSoup, like tools that really allow you to like spam users on LinkedIn. So we don't do any sort of automation on LinkedIn side, like profile views, anything like that. We made a decision from day one, never scrape contact information from a LinkedIn profile page, because that's not public information. The only information we scrape is name, job title, company. The rest we use our own other tools through various APIs and technologies that we've built to figure out what's the rest of that info. So we're not pulling anything private from the LinkedIn profile, which is, I think, also very important, because you don't want to think, hey, I'm signing up for LinkedIn and all these salespeople are going to just start getting this information. So that was another decision that we made from the start that we think was really important. On that point, funny enough, LinkedIn recently got a bit of bad press because I think it was 500 million profiles were leaked on some hacker forum. I'm not sure if you saw the article, but what LinkedIn came out and said was, hey, it's all public information. It wasn't a leak. It was just someone scraped it, but it's all public info, right? And it's kind of funny how LinkedIn's gone after people taking their info, and they're saying, hey, it's our info. And then once they get in trouble for it, now all of a sudden it's, hey, no, that's public info. So
good spin.
Yeah, they have to spin it too, and they're in a tough position. But yeah, so those are kind of the decisions we've made around our product. But we always have backup plans, and they exist for us. But I don't think we're much of an issue compared to many other tools.
You talk a lot about focus. your Twitter, some of your top retweets, your banner on LinkedIn kind of clearly communicates you love to focus on a few things. What have you become better at saying no to over the last couple of years by building these businesses? Could be personal, could be more professional.
I think you naturally have to, because as you start to have some success and you start to meet some other people in your space, you're just presented with a lot more opportunities. And if when I was just getting started, it was like, I'll do anything that I think might work. And that was a big issue for me, like shiny object syndrome. Like nothing worked because I would start something for a few months and then I'd be like, oh, this is so easy and this is so good and this is a hot space and whatever. And it's so easy to do the same thing, within your business. And then when the business is working, other opportunities come up, investors reach out, other people wanting to start businesses that seem good. And you have to focus on the few things that will get you the most results. So the most tangible example I can give is that a few weeks ago, I was looking at a software tool that I saw came up for sale, which I won't mention, but it was a really good-looking tool. Like I enjoyed using it. It hit a problem right on the head that I have had with hiring, and I wanted to acquire them and get working on it. But I sort of came to the realization that to add, let's say, 100K of MRR to Wiza is so much less marginal effort than to, let's say, acquire a business, set it up, everything, and then get from 0 to 100K MRR. So I'm creating the same amount of value with so much less effort. Why wouldn't I put all that effort into the main thing? So yeah, I've worked really hard on being able to say no and focus on just a few things that I really care about, and kind of let the rest out of my head.
What do you do for that? Do you go through questions? Do you have certain routines? What do you once you are presented with something, how do you say no to it, or what do you run it through mentally or on the weekend to identify, hey, I'm not doing it?
I think I've thought about it so much that I actually feel guilt when I'm thinking about another opportunity. Like I'll literally, when I think about doing something different, it's like, I know I shouldn't be doing that. And it just feels right to kind of, work on very few things. So as opportunities come up, and they're not all business opportunities, right? Like sometimes I'm like, I'm not the technical resource, on our team. We have a CTO, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I should learn to code. I want to learn to code, and I probably only take me a couple months and a couple hours a week, and I could be pretty good and, really dig into that more. And then I have to kind of like ease that down or but yeah, I think the guilt is helps me in doing that.
How tempting is it to go jump on Clubhouse or events like that and start promoting yourself to a large crowd?
Yeah, there's that too. It's funny, like we're doing a podcast now, but before this, I think I'd done one or two other podcasts, and I think now I'm at the point where it makes sense to kind of go on podcasts and kind of get out there. But early on in the business, I realized like this is not the activity that gets you from, let's say, 0 to 100K MRR, right? It's not about being on podcasts. I think as you grow, general awareness becomes more important, and it's good to go out there. But at the start, you want to get in front of the people that are looking for your solution, and that's not necessarily on podcasts, so you don't have to go as broad. So I didn't allow myself to do any of that, for example. Same thing on Clubhouse. I don't think that's necessarily valuable for me yet. And so, yeah, the strategy so far in growing Wiza is let's make sure we're in front of everyone who needs our solution bad and is also looking for it. And then we can kind of broaden out from there as we grow.
Mm-hmm. And it does seem like you mentioned your coding. What skills are you doubling down on? Which ones you identified like, you know what, this is what I think I cannot let go. I need to keep working on that.
So sales is kind of my go-to skill that got me started. So I read about sales, but I also make sure I continually practice and not just kind of tell the sales team what they should be doing. So I send cold emails all the time to existing customers that I think should be spending more, to just brand new. All of a sudden I come across this guy on LinkedIn, I send a cold email. I've done cold calls with the team to users that have signed up for us and haven't used our tool in a while. So that's, to me, super, super important. I think we're going to grow through our sales team, but also we're a sales tool. So that's something I need to continually practice. And then also what's tougher for me is reading books. Like I never naturally, I'll listen to podcasts all the time, but I never naturally necessarily, read books. But I think it's super important. So I've been trying to read at least a book a month. And that's kind of the two areas where I feel, is important to me in terms of learning.
Do you prefer books more to podcasts, or podcasts are still on the table, still pretty good when you have?
Yeah, no, I prefer, I like podcasts a lot better. They naturally have like more tactical tips. I listen to, there's almost always any podcast I listen to, something I can learn that I can potentially implement the next day. A book, for example, could have that totally, but like it's more more wisdom in a way. There's more wisdom in books that you don't pick up as much in podcasts, and there's a lot of like driving really deep on a topic where in a 1 hour podcast or even a 3 hour podcast, it's not as researched and like I read Matthew Walker's book on sleep, for example.
Right.
There's, even when Matthew Walker goes on a podcast, he doesn't go in as much detail as he does on his book. So there's a certain detail that you miss. It's just about picking the right books that, are relevant to you and will actually help push you forward.
This is a Peter Thiel question. If it's too hard, maybe we can modify it. I struggle to answer it sometimes myself. What do you believe in that others would find maybe a little bit, maybe a lot insane?
Yeah, it's a pretty funny question because it's almost like the torch thing where it's like, if you really believe in it, it's hard to imagine that other people find it insane. I think naturally I'm pretty contrarian, meaning like if something's common knowledge or commonplace, I tend to think it's the wrong way of doing it, whereas most people, I think, tend to think that if every company is doing it this way, this is the right way of doing it. And maybe bootstrapping is a good example of that. Like, a lot of tech companies think, hey, the way to start a SaaS business is you raise money, raise a seed round, whatever. Whereas I don't see that necessarily as the right way. So I think that's an example. I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but I think in general, the way my head kind of works is contrarian. The other thing is I'm insanely, I guess some people think it's crazy, but I like doing the exact same thing every single day. Mm-hmm. So there's a place in Toronto called IQ Food.
I know it.
Yeah, I eat there for lunch. I eat lunch there every single day, for like 2 years now. Like every single day, same exact goal, nothing changes. So I like repetitive, like same exact thing every day, not same workout every day, but same time in the gym every day.
Well, you remove the fatigue of decision making.
Yeah.
It is. I think it's really underestimated. People think, "Oh, it's not a big deal." It is a big deal because it compounds. You start thinking,
Right.
then there's always the devil's advocate or whatever you want to call it, the second voice. Oh, let's not do that. Let's go do something else.
Right.
And you kind of like instantly you're like sidetracked by this micro decision because you had to think. And people
Right.
don't cut up on that. And then like how like 10 years in, you're like, "Ooh, how did that happen?"
Right. Right. Totally.
It's like like Atomic Habits, for example. The guy who wrote it, it's a micro little things. I'm just gonna check this thing quickly. I'm just gonna sip that little thing quickly, and it's fine. But it always creates a chain of events. And then you get sucked into something for a few hours. You missed on a task you were trying to do, but it's not really that. One day doesn't matter. It's the compounding effect that does 365 times and then 700 times that kills whatever you were onto, right?
Right. I think the compounding effect is just so underestimated of everything. And I think about that when I think about focus, like, starting something, a company usually looks like a straight line and then quite quickly curves up. So it's like, why would you on your curve jump to something else? Or even before your curve, let's say you start working out. How long are you working out in the gym before you see any real results, or before someone else? Probably a couple of months, right? Like,
Yeah.
a couple of months before you see anything is a lot of kind of work to put into something. So you have to be able to kind of just, trust in compounding benefits of that workout. And it's funny, it's like, the first workout you do is the most important workout, because that's what ends up compounding, right? Like, and then the second is a bit less important, but still insanely important, because you're building up that habit and the getting used to going to the gym and getting comfortable there or whatever, all these things. Same thing with a business. Like, the work I do today is very like minor, even though it feels major, because now there's people here and we have a team and we have customers. It feels like I'm doing a lot, but if you think about it, the work I did in day one when I was just whatever in like a basement or wherever I was, where I chose the name, registered the company, decided what the product was going to do, like, these are huge decisions that felt like nothing at the time because there were no customers, there was no money, but they actually meant a lot more than what I do today.
Totally. And what I will say, and it really surprises me, I probably have to kind of dig into it more, but one of the big things that really makes a difference, besides doing it, besides building a habit, besides making it easy, besides the where you're located, gym makes a big difference, like the location, the room, is who you associate yourself with. Mm-hmm. Your identity makes probably one of the biggest differences. If you're like, "Oh, I'm not an athlete," okay, cool. Well, then you're good. Or I'm not an entrepreneur, then, no problem. Tomorrow you can get a job. I think that association is really stronger. That kind of allows people to push through some times that are not the best.
100%. I think that's one of the biggest drivers that kind of decide, everything we do and our frameworks for kind of making decisions. And I don't think you can make any real personal change without, a change in identity coming, along the path. And another gym analogy is kind of, or not necessarily the gym, but what you get, who you become in the process is more important than, what you get in the end. So that's kind of like that identity you set for yourself, like, building that up through, again, back to the fitness point, through working out every day, reinforces that belief in who you are as a person, and that's what keeps your momentum going.
I've also noticed, and I'd be curious if you did too, there's things that you really wanted, like you really, really want it, then you get it. And over time, either in one day or a couple of days or in a month or in a year, you feel exactly almost the same, just like you did before you got that thing. And then it shifts your perspective. You're like, wait, like I don't feel anything. I get it. I have it. I own it. I bought it. And it's this, like, nothing changed.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
Totally. Steve, well, listen, it was so nice to have you. Some really great insights, really, really valuable stuff, which we'll excited to share with our audience. Thank you for being the guest. Before I wrap up, are there any final messages you'd like to leave the audience with? Anything I haven't asked you, you wish I did? Maybe you want to drop a few call to actions to people who need to build their outbound lists. Anything?
Yeah, if you need leads, or you're not really sure what you're doing with sales or cold outreach, check us out at Wiza, wiza.co, or add me on LinkedIn, Stephen Hakami, Stephen with a PH, last name Hakami. I'd love to connect with any of the listeners, and thanks so much for having me on. I had a great time.
Thanks, Stephen, and we'll link it all in the show notes so you guys can go and check it out. But thanks, Stephen, for being a guest. This was another episode of Off the Record Show. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back soon with another cool guest. We're out.